booktube, I am the Book Mage, welcome back to my channel. I know I have done several videos already where I talk about the book Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. In fact, I think I had a slightly unhinged rant about it at the end of like one of my last vlogs. But the thing is, all of those were spoiler free, and like, I honestly don't think I can say everything that I need to say about this book and just how much I don't like it and how bad it is without going into like full spoiler territory. And I just need to talk about it. I just need to get it off my chest. I just need to like exercise this book from my brain, because otherwise I'm just going to keep thinking about it and how bad it was. So what this video is going to be is I am going to be going into full spoilers of both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. And if you have not read either book, but you still kind of want to stay around for like the salty opinions, what I'm going to do, just so that like for my sake, I know that kind of the things I'm talking about are going to like make sense in context. I'm going to give you the context. So I'm going to do a really quick rundown of like what happened in Fourth Wing, which is not a lot, so that shouldn't take too much time. And then I don't think I've ever done this for a book before, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of like the major events of Iron Flame. And then if you have not read this, you'll hopefully be able to understand why I'm just so perplexed. This is kind of your last chance to click away if you don't want spoilers. I will timestamp everything, so if you're just here for the Iron Flame discourse and not like the Fourth Wing recap, you can skip ahead. I'm just so thoughtful like that. I do want to say, you can probably tell this video is like mostly unplanned. I wasn't really planning to make another like Iron Flame Empyrean video, hence the fact that like I'm just in like my pajamas. I'm actually sat on a box, and pretty much most of this is like unplanned, unscripted. I do have my iPad with me so that I can look at notes, because otherwise I will go on tangents, I will start ranting, and I want to remember the events in order. So if you wonder like why I'm not looking at the screen, I know it's really bad to like not make eye contact. Would that I were a YouTuber that had like cool overlays and animations and things, but alas, I am lazy. So for the most part, I'm going to be like looking at like the bullet points of like the events of this book on my iPad. So I still think I've put in more effort than went into this book though. If you're here for this, strap in, because this is going to be a long one. So, Fourth Wing. Basic premise. A girl called Violet Sorrengail. She's 20 years old and she's a scribe in training. She's the daughter of General Lilith Sorrengail, who's like a powerful dragon rider, and she's basically in charge of like Navarra's armies. I think she's like the second in command. And in this world, dragons and humans kind of have like this alliance. It's very vague, very tenuous. And one entire branch of the country's military is made up of dragon riders. Then you have dragon riders, scribes, healers, and infantry. So Violet was meant to be joining the scribe quadrant at Basgiath War College. So she'd been raised to be a scribe by her now deceased father, who was also a scribe. Violet's mother, however, forces her to join the Dragon Rider quadrant, just like Violet's older sister Mira and her deceased older brother Brennan. So before she goes off to join the Rider recruits, Mira tells Violet to stay away from Xaden Riorson. And if you heard that name and you realised it starts with like a cool letter X and therefore this man is the love interest, you would be correct. And if you also guess that Violet runs into Xaden like almost immediately and thinks like long and hard about like how hot he is before like she knows who he actually is, you are also correct. So he kind of vaguely threatens her, sort of, but we can all tell where this is going. Xaden is the son of this guy who led a rebellion against like Navarra and its leadership, which is the country that Violet is from. And all of the rebels were killed, executed, and all of their kids were given like these special magic marks to brand them as traitors, so that everyone knows that these are the children of traitors. So the first task to get into Basgiath is to cross a perilous narrow walkway. It's called the parapet, and you just like hope that you don't fall off and die. That's it. So Violet succeeds. She makes a friend called Rhiannon along the way, and at Basgiath she is reunited with her childhood friend Dane, who she's like had a crush on for years. Dane does not think that Violet is cut out for the Riders quadrant, and he's very, very vocal about this, because Violet suffers from a chronic illness. It's kind of like EDS. Essentially, her body is weaker and more fragile, she's sort of prone to injury, and she's less physically capable than like the other recruits. So we hate Dane. Also, obviously, Violet is recruited into Xaden's squad, which is the squad that Dane is also in. So Xaden is now her direct superior. Yay. So at Basgiath, the whole shtick is basically survive like until graduation. Like that's it. You just survive and like pass the test they throw at you, and the tests are kind of designed to kill you. Don't look too much into it. It has the stupidest reasoning, but like, don't think about it. Yeah, so recruits are known to kill each other. There are loads of like tests, trials, exams that also kill off a lot of students. Basically, like half the side characters are dead before the end. There's also one really obnoxious, annoying bully, like this guy that just bullies Violet constantly, like actively wants to kill her, wants to murder her, like he's so set on killing her. His name is Jack, and I wish I did not have to mention him specifically, but I will have to bitch about this in the plot later. So just remember that Jack exists. So Violet is passing the tests, they get to like the dragon bonding ceremony, which is like in 2 parts. It's not important, but basically all the kids essentially take a stroll through a bunch of dragons, and they hope not to die and that one of the dragons will choose them. And of course, Violet is the first person in like the history of ever to get 2 dragons. She's so special, guys. She's so special. She gets 2 dragons. So she bonds not only the biggest, meanest, strongest, coolest black dragon, who's like one of the older dragons. He's like well respected among dragons, he's so powerful. Not only that, but she also bonds a tiny, useless, but super unique, rarely ever seen golden feathertail dragon, who, spoilers, it turns out, is actually a baby dragon, and humans don't know about baby dragons or what they look like. It's dragons keep this a secret for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. Like, they know about eggs and they know about full-grown dragons, but like the stage in between egg and adult dragon is a secret. I know there's some stupid like reason about they have like weird wild magic until they like become an adolescent, but I still think it's stupid. The baby dragon's power, her name is Andana, her power is that she can literally stop time. So Violet gets lightning powers. When you bond with a dragon, you get like your own special magic ability. So Violet gets lightning powers, and she kills her bully Jack by using those lightning powers to drop a mountain on him. That is how it's phrased in the book. She finally hooks up with Xaden at some point because, like, spoilers, Violet's big black dragon, Tern, is actually mated to Xaden's dragon, Scale. And yes, his dragon's name is Scale, but just spelt like this. Violet is also aware that Xaden has been like sneaking out with other like marked recruits, so like more of the children of the original rebels, and she has been keeping this a secret. There's like a whole bunch of pointless plot, other stuff happening, and at the end of the very first year, recruits do these things called war games. It's like a simulated battle thing between recruits. And Dane, remember Dane, his power is that he can read minds when he touches people. So he touches Violet like he has been doing like the whole book, and he reads her mind and sees that Xaden has been like sneaking off with these other marked recruits to like this one specific village. So Dane tells his dad, who's also somebody high up in the army, and mysteriously Xaden's group are sent off to this specific village for the war games. Violet also goes with them, and surprise, it's a trap. And a bunch of evil, magic-using people who don't have dragons but can summon Wyvern instead are actually the real secret bad guys, and they show up to attack and kill everyone. So a bunch of people die, but Violet saves the day, and like using Andana's time abilities, like she stops time, Violet gets stabbed during all this, and then she wakes up after the battle in the rebel headquarters where, plot twist, her brother is actually still alive. So if you weren't aware that that was the entirety of the plot of Fourth Wing, more or less, that is the entirety of the plot of Fourth Wing. So from here, this is all book 2, and just be aware, book 2 is like twice the length of book 1. So, again, strap in. So going into book 2, Violet learns that her brother, Brennan, who is still alive, is actually helping to lead the rebellion because the school and the leadership are basically all corrupt. And the basic plot is that Violet's country, Navarra, has these magic wards that, like, the dragons helped create them so long ago. And no other country has these magical wards. And these magic wards are the only thing that can keep the evil magic users, who are called Venin, out. All the other people that don't live in Navarra are having to deal with these evil magic Venin and like their evil magic summoned Wyvern, and Violet's country is like just leaving everyone else to die but also keeping this all under wraps. So at this point, Violet sort of, but not really, kind of breaks up with Xaden because he didn't tell her like all the exact details about like his rebel life and everything that he was doing and planning, and now Violet has trust issues because they weren't like 100% honest with each other. Violet and Xaden fly back to school. They kind of pull off like a believable excuse, and then they kind of go right back to class. Dane's dad gets the blame for like them, like people dying during the war games, like they kind of cover it up. And he's replaced with a guy called Varish, who is like a bitchy torturer extraordinaire. And obviously he specifically really hates Violet. Oh, and also because Xaden is older than Violet, he is now no longer stationed at the school. He is now stationed at a quite distant rider outpost. And this is an issue because their dragons are mated and they can't be apart for long periods of time. So they are constantly flying back and forth so that their dragons can fuck. The plot is so deep, guys. So Violet finally starts to kind of notice the propaganda in the school and the way that leadership is covering up everything that's really happening, if it wasn't really glaringly obvious already. A huge thing for Violet is that she never wants to be kept in the dark. She wants like all the truth, all the time, especially from Xaden, who she won't get back with him until like he sort of vaguely promises to like always be like 100% honest with her, even though the only reason he didn't really do that any sooner was because, I mean, she's also like the general's daughter and everything, but like, you know, it was to keep his rebel friends and like himself safe, bearing in mind Violet's other best friend reads minds. So yeah, Violet also at this point decides not to tell any of her friends any of the truths that she knows about like the real world outside the school, and like what's really happening and like why a bunch of their friends are now all dead, or like how they died or why. Violet's little golden feather-tailed dragon Andana has also gone into hibernation so that she can grow up into an adolescent dragon. It's like a whole, dragons do like a big sleep thing to grow up. So the torturer guy, Varish, uses Andana's absence to punish Violet for like not having her dragon present for classes. And he does this in a weird way by like trying to make her burn out and die by like overusing her magic under the guise of it being like practice. And this is mainly because Violet can't explain Andana not being there by saying that she's a baby and in like this secret dragon sleep, because that's like still top secret dragon information that she's not allowed to share. But even though the thing is, every other dragon obviously already knows this because they are dragons, Varish has a dragon, right? He's got like a weird evil dragon. He's actually got like the only dragon in this whole like book series actually like, I think it's really cool. Varish's dragon could tell him this information at any time, as could anybody else's dragon. But like they choose not to. And Varish's dragon, plus technically any other dragons that know that this is going on, are all happy to watch Varish try and torture this information out of Violet, essentially, who can't tell him because the dragons don't want human to know this knowledge, but the dragons also won't stop the humans from, like, torturing each other to find out that very same knowledge. So like, do not pay attention to the plot if you want it to make any sense. So during all this, Xaden is still leading the rebels, so he's basically smuggling these like magic engraved daggers out of Navarra to give to the rebels, because these magic engraved daggers are like one of the only things that can kill like the evil magic venin guys, right? He's giving these to the rebels of the neighbouring country, and most of those rebels are griffin flyers, so they don't have dragons, they all have griffins, and they have like their own griffin riding school. That's because all of the dragons live inside of the wards, and since Navarra is the only country that has these magical wards, nowhere else has dragons apart from Navarra. And just to reiterate, this is what everyone in the book, apart from like a select few who've seen the venin, this is what they all think the war is about. They basically all think that these evil griffin riders are just like trying to invade, that it's just like a normal war. And like, as part of this ruse, obviously, like, all the citizens don't know that venin exists. Nobody knows that venin or wyvern exist or like are real. Any like literature or mention of them has been like erased from history, and it's all been replaced by these griffin riders are the bad guys. Please do not think too long and hard about any of the plot, as the weight of your thoughts might break the single thread tenuously holding all of this together. So the school trials this year, by the way, because we still have those, the school trials this year include things like being tortured and being interrogated to prove that you won't break during like an actual real like enemy interrogation. And obviously Violet now has like actual valuable information that could get her and like all of her friends killed, which is weird when you think about the fact that like the people who gave her all of this information knew that the second year at Dragon Rider School was gonna involve all of these tasks about like having secret information and not giving it up, and like being tortured to get secret information out of people. Yeah, it's weird that everyone sort of supposedly knows this in advance, like Xaden's done this already, and so like they all know that this is going to be a thing that like Violet has to do. And it would be so much easier if she didn't like know the exact location of like the rebel base, or like what they were doing, or like the existence of Venin, or like the corruption of the school, or anything like that, and like what their plans are, and like all these dragon secrets. But then there wouldn't really be any tension. So pretty much everyone has to be really stupid for this to like all be set up so that Violet can have like obstacles. And if you're wondering at this point like why they're not like with their dragons, why they don't get help from the dragons, the school keeps tricking them into drinking like this magic serum that cuts off their like psychic connection to their dragons, so they can't like talk to their dragons. I didn't previously mention at this point that Violet passed nearly all of her first year exams, like all of her combat classes specifically, by poisoning other recruits like ahead of time. She's like really good at poisons and poisoning and that sort of thing. But in this book, when someone hands her some weird smelling water, she thinks to herself about how it like smells and tastes weird, and then she just drinks it, no questions asked. And then she's shocked to find out that she's been drugged. And this happens multiple times. I've got the exact quote, just in case you weren't sure. So she gets handed a water skin, and she says, "We all uncork our skins. The water is crisp and cold, but there's something else there too. Pungent, earthy, and something bitterly floral that I can't quite place. I close the skin, cringing at the aftertaste." Professor Grady really needs to take better care of his skins. So like, she's like poisoner extraordinaire, and yet she tastes some water that tastes disgusting, earthy, pungent, floral, and she's like, I guess he's just put this in a bad flask. Sure, it's fine. Like, really? Are we that dumb? And this isn't even the first time she's been drugged in this book. Anyway, during their interrogation exam, the school healer, who has known Violet for years because of her chronic illness, conveniently leaves the cell door unlocked for like Violet and her team to escape. And therefore they get like this very sought after patch of like achievement. It's like something that recruits get for like passing certain tests or being the best at something. Even though they didn't actually earn that and basically cheated because they had like outside help. But you do need to know that Violet is part of like, you know, the best and coolest squad who like pass everything. So right after this, they basically go right back to class. And in the most hilarious way, right? Like a contestant being called back onto like a shitty game show. Violet's bully Jack is just miraculously back after having had a mountain dropped on him in the last book. He's just like walking around like fist bumping people. Everyone seems really happy that he's back as well. Even though he was like the biggest asshole in book one, everyone's just so happy to see that Jack is here. Like they genuinely do like a little announcement that he's back, and like he comes out to like gasps and cheers. I really thought this would be like one of the worst scenes in the book, but honey, you've got a big storm coming. So there's a whole bunch of like plot with no consequence that happens. Violet does eventually tell her friends about like all the stuff that she's been keeping secret from them, and obviously they're all on her side, right? So as a group, they agree to break into the forbidden section of the archives to find like the journals from Navarra's founders who like very first created these magical wards, because they want to see if they can find out like how the ward magic works, because if they had that information they could just give that technology to the other countries and then everybody would be protected. So they steal 2 of these journals, but Violet gets caught with one of them on her possession. She's basically taken away for even more interrogation, and small aside, but Varish basically became like my favourite character in this scene just because of how much he shit talks Dane. I hate Dane, and like Dane is in the room and Varish is just being like so catty. He's so fucking messy. I swear his scenes were like the only ones in the whole book where I was like, I just genuinely amused. I don't think I was meant to feel that way, but it was the only enjoyment I got, so I'm taking it. So Varish forces Dane to read Violet's mind, but Violet tries to show Dane specifically like the truth about what really happened with like the venin at the village and how people died, and like the magic wards and the rebels, and Dane ends up coming like back onto Violet's side, which is unfortunate because it means that Dane is in the rest of the book. So they escape. Of course Xaden comes in and does like a big daring rescue, and they decide actually to tell the whole school like what's really going on, and they give every student and teacher like the choice to fly off with them and become rebels. So this book is split into 2 parts. Just remember now, that's the end of part 1, and we're now going on to part 2. So all the recruits and a few of the teachers move into Xaden's house, which is this big rebel base. And yeah, it might be time to mention that not only is Xaden the son of like the original leader of the rebellion, he's actually basically defected royalty, like the heir to the throne of the rebelling country, because yeah, making him like the bad boy rebel with like the shadow powers and like the big scary dragon and the tragic past just was not enough. He has to basically also be the absentee king. So Violet's little dragon, Andana, also wakes up and she's got like different coloured scales now. They look kind of like a weird shiny black. This comes up later. And she's only like a teenager now, but she's like an angsty teenager. So she's now like sassy and rude to everyone, and like for every reason. And if you think that this is endearing, it really is not. It is very much how you would imagine a middle-aged military wife writes angsty teenager dialogue, which is to say bad. So Andana also has a damaged wing, and this is due to issues with her not doing her dragon sleeping properly. So while she can fly, she will never in her life bear a rider on her back. Which, considering dragons get really huge in this story, like this seems kind of weird. Even when she gets to maximum size, she won't be able to carry a rider, which at that point would be a really negligible amount of weight for the size that she would be. Considering that Ten, Violet's main dragon, like the big black scary dragon, he can carry Violet and Andana at the same time, and like their packs and like other stuff, and sometimes additional people as well, and like this has never been an issue for him. It's not strenuous for him because like he's massive, and it's like, well, is Andana not also going to grow a similar size? Like other dragons that aren't even as big as him can carry multiple people, so like I feel like a dragon gets to a certain size where like a human is just so small compared to them that it's like, does it matter? Is that a thing? If a dragon can still take off after eating an entire sheep for breakfast, why can it not carry a human on an empty stomach? It's the same weight! Anyway, so this is the point where the book introduces pointless girl hate. Yeah. So one of the rebel griffin riders, whose name is Kat, is Xaden's ex-girlfriend. Don't you just love it? And she really hates Violet, and she really wants to get back with Xaden. It is her whole personality. And people in the book that like know Kat kind of say that there's more to her than that, but there isn't. Kat is also nobility. So when the gang go to like meet this dodgy Viscount to ask him for this like big special magic thing called a luminary that will maybe help them remake these magical wards, Kat is there to make everything worse. And it's also revealed that she and Xaden were previously engaged. Apparently it's plot. So this Viscount asks Violet for a display of her incredibly impressive lightning powers. And this is so that she can like impress him enough to like get this thing that they want from him. And he insists that she go into this big amphitheater arena to do this. You know, like the kind that you would assume that you would maybe do like gladiatorial combat in. And surprise, it's a trick. He expected her to do combat in the arena. The arena meant for combat. Violet is surprised by this. So she has to fight a venin that came out of a literal box. You won't believe me when I say that this is still not the most stupid scene in this book. So obviously they win. So as part of this trade agreement for this magic luminary thing to make the wards, all of the Griffin riders are now going back to the rebel base to team up with the dragon riders so that they can all fight as one. It doesn't really make sense. Griffins, however, can't fly as high as dragons can fly. So in order to get to the rebel base, which is like really high up, they all have to walk there on foot up this really treacherous mountain pass, and so like some minor characters just like die in the process. They try to make the magic wards work. They try to do like this ritual thing. It doesn't really work. They get a message from General Melgren, the leader of Navarra's armies, basically like Violet's mum's boss. And his dragon is like the only dragon that's like bigger and badder than Tern. And also, yes, if you thought the guy whose name was Melgren was bad, you are once again several steps ahead of Rebecca Yarros and every other character in this book. The short version is that Melgren's dragon is the one that gave all of the rebel children their like magic rebel brands, but that was a bit of a fucky-wucky, as giving them the brands is basically what gave these children of the rebels the ability to not be seen by Melgren's magical prophetic powers if 3 or more rebel children are in one place at one time. Bit of an oversight if you ask me. Anyway, Melgren, using his special powers of foresight, has like foreseen this battle, which he knows they're going to lose, so he asks all the rebel riders to come and fight the venin with him together on the border where he's predicted this attack will be. They say no for various reasons, and he takes like his entire military to the border to do this fight that he's already seen that they will lose, so like I don't understand why they do that anyway. But after he's gone, Violet and co work out that this is actually like a distraction, and the venin are just trying to get like all of the armies away from anywhere else and out to the borders, and that the venin are really going to attack Basgiath War College instead, because they can destroy the wards from the War College. So here is where shit just kind of starts to get a bit wild. So just bear with me. Firstly, so because Xaden's dragon was also his grandfather's dragon, because of world building, this means that he actually gets to have 2 magical powers. And his second secret power is basically mind reading, which is like a very OP, super special power in this world. Like, you can be murdered just for being a mind reader. And this is in addition to his bad boy shadow wielding powers. So anyway, that aside, so they all go to the school and try and convince Violet's mum what's really going on. And she is convinced that everything is fine. And to prove this to them, she takes them to the Wardstone just to see how fine it is. Spoilers, it is not fine. Jack Barlow, Violet's resurrected bully, and his dragon are with the Wardstone, having killed all of the guards. Jack kills his own dragon by like slitting its throat and like getting its blood all over the Wardstone. And I guess this breaks the Wardstone, and so like the magic fails and like all the wards go down. So now there are no magic wards keeping like the evil magic venom army away. And big reveal, Jack is secretly a venin. Yeah, so that secret serum that they were using on like the recruits that cuts people off magically from their dragons, that they kept using in like the interrogation exams, that was actually developed specifically for Jack, and it's to keep him from having access to his venin, like evil magic powers. And the healer teacher who let them out of their cell during the interrogation trials, yeah, he's spent the whole year like fixing Jack and basically resurrecting him. Apparently this is all while everyone like high up at the school knows about venin, and they knew that Jack was venin. And again, just to clarify, the staff at Violet's school decided to keep Jack alive, must have worked out at some point that he was secretly a venin, and then still decided at this point to keep him alive, in secret, heal him completely, and then keep his powers nullified with this magic serum that they developed just for him. And apparently just at some point must have just like stopped giving it to him or something, or forgot, because he very much has his powers right now. I do have to break from the plot at this point just to ask, why? Why did they do this? Why did they need to bring him back to life? Every other recruit dies. Every other recruit messes up even a little bit, dies. Jack gets squished by a mountain, recovered. They find out he's venin at some point, still recover him. At what point? Why? Why? Why did they need to bring him back to life? And do not say that it was so that they could study him or learn about the venin, because they just let him go back to class. They just let him resume his secret identity as someone who isn't a venin, and just let him go back to taking regular classes with all of his friends who were all cheering and fist bumping him. He's just among everyone else. No guards, no escorts, nothing. They just let him go free. They just let him go back to class, back to training with his dragon, knowing that he's fully a venin. The enemy, just chilling in the school. Also, subsequent aside, why did a dragon bond with him? In this world, dragons are psychically connected to their riders. Like, they share thoughts and feelings. And I feel like the options for this are, 1, Jack's dragon did not know that Jack was a venin. Maybe because Jack was like blocking out certain parts of like his knowledge and his memories and his feelings or whatever. But this does mean that the dragon would have to be okay with being blocked out of its own rider's head like that, and like never got suspicious or like made any demands of like explanations or anything, and was just okay with this, and therefore just somehow never knew that its own rider was a venin, right? Option 2, Jack's dragon did know that Jack was venin, but was okay with having a venin rider, even though the venin want to destroy the wards, which is like the only thing that keeps the dragons and like their hatchlings safe, which therefore puts all the dragons at risk. And Jack's dragon, for some reason, was just okay with this, and has chosen to be evil as well. And option 3, which isn't really an option, but I've been generous, option 3, Jack's dragon might know that Jack is venin, but is somehow possibly being controlled by Jack's venin magic, which if so, the book has yet to introduce this. If Jack's dragon is unwillingly under his control, it somehow stayed that way all through the time Jack had a mountain dropped on him, all through the time that they were apart while he must have been like, you know, being put back together over many months in the infirmary, and also taking this magic juice that cuts off everyone else to their dragons, so like he wouldn't have been connected to his dragon or had access to any of his magical powers during this time. But even during all that time, when the dragon would not have been able to be under his control, it just somehow never broke free, never told the other dragons like what had happened or what was still happening, never fucking left. I don't know. The theory is so wonky, but I feel like that's going to end up being some sort of dumb, stupid canon explanation for it, and I'm just calling it out now that it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. I just think it is the only way they can go with it. The other options mean that either the dragon was just willfully ignorant and evil against its own kind for some reason, or actually just suicidal, which is worse. Anyway, back to plot. So with the wardstone down, all of the wards now fail, so the venom come in and there's like this big final battle which you don't really see very much of. These ancient journals they've been translating eventually reveal to the characters that there are actually 7 breeds of dragon, not 6. And conveniently, Violet's dragon Andana is actually one of these super special, never before seen, super rare 7th breed of dragon that honestly till this point no one even knew existed. So Andana also casually just drops the information that she was conscious inside of her egg for 650 years, waiting to feel a potential rider. And she always knew that Violet would be her rider because she could just like sense her out there. You know, Violet is very much the chosen one here. And this has wild implications for the way that recruits are like actually recruited and like bond with their dragons, because do all dragons do this? Do all dragons kind of know ahead of time? Is the whole dragon choosing thing from book 1 just bullshit, or like what? Is it just, or is Andana just special? Maybe Violet is just special. Also weird that Andana is mentally, consciously, has existed for over 650 years, and yet is at this point still a sassy teenager, and was previously a little baby. Not looking into it. So yeah, Andana uses her unique dragon magic, along with 6 other dragons of like the other dragon types, to restart this wardstone at Basgiath, which, because of world building, means that they can't do the same thing at any of the other like endangered countries that don't have wards, because each one dragon can only power one wardstone, and Andana is the only dragon of her kind, so they can only currently power one wardstone, and it is the one at Basgiath, so Navarra gets its wards back. At this point, Jack is captured. Violet's mum dies, being like a battery jumpstart for the wardstone. The wards are fixed, and the battle is won. I know what's coming. Violet goes to find Xaden, who during the battle was fighting with like the most powerful Venin and losing. When Violet finally sees Xaden, Xaden is now a Venin. I guess basically he was losing the battle so hard to the Venin that he just felt like he needed to make a deal for something, like save your friends or something like that. It's just, it's so vague. But at the same time, like they would have won the battle. Like it was so inconsequential. So the main Venin guy made Xaden also a Venin. So now he's evil. So much more angsty bad guy. And if being the rebel leader with the shadow powers wasn't like bad boy enough, now he's just so corrupted and angsty. And then the book ends with Xaden going to find Jack to ask him how to cure being Venin, which the book has already set up at this point has no cure. And I need to read for you the last paragraph of this book, because when I first read it, I read it like 4 times. Like before my brain would accept that I wasn't reading like some sort of ironic edgelord tweet that like got put in by mistake as a joke or something. If you haven't heard this before, I'm so sorry for what you're about to hear. So Xaden's basically telling Jack that like he would rather die than become Venin, even though he just agreed to become Venin. And Jack points out, all this time you've been convincing everyone you're the hero, and now you'll be the villain. Especially in her story. Welcome to our fucked up family. Guess we're brothers now. I can't. Those are the actual real, really real last lines of this book. It's real. Well, welcome to our fucked up family. It's a real thing, and it's printed in here. They couldn't even imply it, could they? They couldn't even imply it. They literally had to say, now Xaden will be the villain in Violet's story. Oh, I feel like I almost had some sort of conniption the first time I read that. I felt like I was like, am I tripping? That is definitely the worst part of this book. Honestly, all the things with Jack in it were like the worst parts of the book. It was so laughable. The ending especially, it is potentially one of the most cringe things I think I have ever read, not just in a book. I think it's the most cringe thing I've ever read in any book ever. But like, even just factoring in like shit I've seen on the internet, like that's bad. That's bad. It really is giving Welcome to My Twisted Mind. So that was Iron Flame. And now I kind of really need to just like talk about some things. This is kind of not really in any order. This is just the order that it angered me in. So, firstly, there are two characters in this book. You may have noticed there are two characters in this book. What I mean by that is that every single time a character is going to do something, have an effect on something, have a cool power, have a cool attribute, anything at all, it's either Violet or Xaden. Nobody else matters. Nobody else matters. Everyone else is pure window dressing, background fluff, supplementary. Like, they don't have any impact on the story. They're all interchangeable, to be honest. It's like, the book will try and trick you by giving somebody what seems like a cool power in the book. So Violet's friend Rhiannon is obviously there to just play like the best friend. And she's never going to have any important plot points. Nothing she ever specifically does is ever going to matter for the book and the plot. There's never going to be a situation in these books where Rhiannon is off doing something separate from everyone else that like Violet and Xaden can't have like a secret hand in doing, that has any actual impact on the plot, that wouldn't have been able to progress without that. Everything is just Violet or Xaden, you know what I mean? No other characters really matter. They're kind of there just to put the main characters in situations. But it's also kind of like, if people are supposed to have like cool powers, you know, in the book, people might say to Rhiannon, oh my god, you're so powerful, or oh my god, your powers are so cool, but they're never going to matter. Violet is the super powerful lightning wielder who's like stronger than everyone else, and Xaden has like these two super unique like special power abilities and things. You know that Violet's gonna get another one. Her dragon could stop time. Like, nobody else is allowed to do these things. No other character is allowed to have anything as special as Violet or Xaden. And it's getting to the point where they have so many things. I was laughing my ass off. Like, even in book 1 it was starting to get funny, but like in book 2, and I kind of started making like a little list. This is just the shit that like Violet and Xaden have going for them. So Violet, so she's the daughter of General Sorrengail. She has the biggest, baddest dragon in the school. She has, because of that, insanely powerful lightning magic. She's the only rider ever to have a second dragon. Her second dragon is a never-before-seen, unique, like, golden feathertail, which then turns out to be an even more unique, secret, 7th type of dragon that nobody even knew existed. Like, it got more special, guys, between books. She is also the chosen one of this, like, unique dragon that it waited 650 years for, where nobody else was good enough. She will also develop a second magic power because she has 2 dragons, so she will get this second magical power. Oh, I didn't mention, but she has like silver ombre hair, of course. Also in true, like, you know, like YA romancy kind of fashion, she's described as being so tiny. Like, she's so much smaller and paler and daintier than everyone else, but she's also like the quickest and like lethal with her daggers, and like she basically never loses a fight. And she's also like the smartest person in the school. So, Xaden, on the other hand, aside from name begins with an X, I think I mentioned that before, so he is the son of the original leader of the rebels, and, you know, like, executed dad equals sad, tragic backstory. He is now the current leader of the rebels. He has the other super powerful dragon who is mated to Violet's dragon. He has insanely powerful shadow magic. He also has this second incredibly useful, rare, almost death sentence level magical power for reading minds. He's technically the king of Arisha, the other country. In terms of the school, he's like the strongest, the most badass, like the scariest guy in school. He's the wing leader of Violet's squad, and he has now turned into a Venin, the evil, dark, magic-using enemy. Can any other character have a thing? Can any other character have anything cool or interesting going on for them, and you'll be like, oh well, somebody else has got like a big dragon, or like somebody else is related to somebody cool, but like everything else they do is so normal. Everyone else has such normal powers and normal love lives and normal dragons. Nobody else does any plot things. Like, it's always Violet that realizes things, do you know what I mean? It's like, she's the one that was like looking into stuff, and it's always Violet or Xaden that like gets caught up in things. Like, nobody else does. Nobody else has like a side character side plot going on that then ties into the main plot. It's only Violet and only Xaden. Every single other character is literally just there like trying to study and pass their exams, and Violet and Xaden are having like the most YA ass adventures of all time. I've just written poorly written in like big letters. The thing is, this ties into so many subcategories, and I just kind of want to start off by saying that like I understand that this is a fantasy book. The fantasy aspect, rarely have I ever seen it done this bad. It's so derivative, it's so generic, it so doesn't make sense. Like, I feel like I'm throwing facts at you like, oh, the dragons keep these things secret, but yet they won't tell their own riders, hey, stop trying to get information from other people who have it, because like we don't want you to know. We just don't want you to know. Either tell everyone or tell them to stop asking those questions, you know? So much of this just does not make sense. I mean, the world building, I'll get onto the world building really, but like, it's just so absent. And I mean, I talked about this mainly in the first book as well, but like the way that information is given to you, the exposition is atrocious. Violet has this thing in the first book where whenever she's in a stressful situation, she just starts recounting to herself like factual information about the country that she's from. So like, she'll be undertaking this like perilous exam, right? She'll be like walking across the parapet or doing some sort of like deadly obstacle course, and she'll be thinking to herself, I come from a country called Navarra. Navarra has wards around it, powered by dragons. The neighbouring country is called Orisha. Orisha has these griffin riders and a griffin rider. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's literally just, if I got stressed and decided to start expositing about, oh well, I live in England, it's attached to Scotland, it's on an island. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it's weird. It's weird that, and she's supposed to be like the smartest person in her year. She's supposed to speak like multiple languages. She's a history buff. She knows more than like everyone else, and she's meant to be like super intelligent. And it's just like, okay, but why when she's stressed, in order to distract herself and keep her brain busy, is she recounting the most asinine list of facts? Why is this what keeps her brain steady? I don't even have to think those things aloud, like in my head, to know them. They're just there as a thought, like, I know what country I'm from. If I get stressed and I need to distract myself, thinking about the country I am from and listing it to myself as a fact is not gonna help. So like, I feel like even like diegetically, like contextually within the world, I understand that Rebecca Yarros has tried to do this thing where in order to exposit to you, in order to give you like vague bits of like fantasy world building that she couldn't figure out how to put anywhere else, even though there's a heading of like above every chapter with like an extra little bit of like world building shit in there, which always spoils the upcoming chapter because it tells you what it's going to be about by telling you a bit of information that you haven't needed until now. She very much does not trust her readers to hear something in chapter 1 and still remember it at chapter 5. She just doesn't. She will make sure that the heading of chapter 5 gives you all the info you need about like what's going to happen in chapter 5, and it will never have been mentioned before. And that is how so much of this book works. It's like, if there's going to be like a new plot thing, it's not something that's ever foreshadowed or alluded to. It's just, you'll learn about it in the chapter header. I understand that Rebecca Yarros was trying to give you the exposition in a way that didn't feel like a big expo dump, but it just feels like that. It just feels like that anyway, because Violet is just dumping a whole load of information on you at a time when, I know that's supposed to be her quirk, I just feel like the information that she, the smartest person in the school, would be recalling would be a bit more detailed, a bit more niche, a bit more like, you know, effort for her to remember it, a bit more distracting. Something that isn't just like the very most basic ways in which this world functions. Going on with the poorly written thing, there's some weird plot holes. So, Jack, why did they bring him back? Why did they let him loose in the school to just like do whatever he wanted? Why did they let the serum wear off that controls his evil magic powers? Why was his dragon okay with this? I have a lot of questions about Jack, honestly. None of them good. Why, when the dodgy Viscount guy negotiated a deal for this magical luminary that Violet wanted to help like start up some wards, why in his conditions did they include giving the rebels more resources than they were asking for, in the form of telling the entirety of like the Griffin Flight School to just like go with them. Why was that a thing? Does he not need those to like defend his own country? It's so confused. Why is Navarra Violet's country? Why are they so opposed to just like letting people know the truth? Like, why can't the common folk just know that Wyvern and Venin are real? It just seems weird to waste so many resources not only knowing that you have to like fight the Venin, but also to fight this entire fake war against the other country. I know they're genuine enemies now, but it's like, yeah, that is what happens when you like leave people to die and also brand them as the real enemy when there's an actual real enemy out there, and spread that as propaganda as an excuse to like kill people that tried to cross your border. It just seems weird to like no one except like the top brass in like the military and like maybe the royalty, I think, know that Venin exist, right? And it's weird to me that they're obviously training people in this Dragon Rider Academy to become Dragon Riders to fight the war, but the war that all the Dragon Riders are fighting, like even Mira, Violet's older sister, who is very capable, she doesn't know about the Wyvern or the Venin. So it's not like they reveal it to you once you graduate. She's this whole time been fighting griffins and griffin flyers. So the country that has access to dragons and dragon warfare is using it to fight the griffins, not the Venin. And all of the dragons who know about the existence of Wyvern and Venin, but just don't tell anyone about it, they're okay with that. They're okay with just letting their fellow dragons and themselves be recruited into a human war for human political reasons, and lots of dragons and their riders die in the war against the Griffin Flyers, and that isn't even the real fight, and the dragons know this, and they just go with it. I just think that even if you're not opening your gates to like foreign refugees, why are you actively running like a decades-long? Why waste 100% of your resources on the thing that you know isn't even the actual threat? Because you're not saving anything for the actual threat. Because none of your actual dragon riding recruits, except for like the very top guys in charge, are even allowed to know what the actual threat is or be prepared for it. So like, how would you fight it? You can't be like, oh, just close your eyes. Just go fight and close your eyes. Like, what's the plan? I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I think we're just coming to the conclusion. It doesn't make sense. She doesn't know how to world build. She doesn't know how to write reasons for things. The fact that like the war college is like the only look into like the actual world, the landscape, the country Navarra that we actually get. And on the other side we only ever get like the rebel base. The whole rest of the world feels empty. It feels unpopulated. You might like pass a village or hear about like attacks on villages or outposts, but you don't exist in them. They're not populated. They don't have a culture. They don't have a feeling. You just think like, oh, generic fantasy village, like I'm gonna picture like a few farmhouses, maybe like a shop or something, but like there's no, it's not like a, you know how different fantasy worlds, you picture them differently, they feel different. Not in this. Not in this book. It's so hard to get invested in this world and understand like, why do I care about these thousands of peasants and like the other countries, like all these commoners in the other countries? Because I only know like a bunch of characters that have names that we're introduced to, and it's like, oh well, so and so's got a family out there and so's family runs a shop out there and they might get killed, and it's like, yeah, but half of the named characters on the actual page get killed like every other chapter, so I'm really actually not attached to them, and also they don't have any sort of bearing or impact on the story itself, so again, I'm not really attached to them. And if you think I'm gonna give a shit about like their mum and dad or their aunt and uncle who don't ever appear on the page, in what world? It's just, I don't know why I care about this country. I don't know why I care about this world. Like, so often people will say things to like, I'm sure at some point somebody's offered Violet and Xaden this basic thing where it's like, oh yeah, they could just fly away. They could just take their dragons, fly overseas, fly far away from this conflict and just not get involved. They could just go live somewhere else. They could just go be somewhere else. And Violet's like, no, I'm really set on like saving my home country and also all these other countries. And I'm like, okay, but like, as a reader, when the only characters that you've been made to care about, and to be fair, I still don't care about them, are Violet and Xaden, I guess as a reader, you're probably thinking, yeah, why, like, for the book's sake, for the interest of the reader, why don't we just do that? Why don't we just, like, end it here and just go watch them, like, bang for the next, like, 400 pages on some fantasy tropical island or something? I feel like the fans would like that over several chapters of walking up a deadly rocky incline with a bunch of griffins, maybe? Just pick any part of this book and it's like, did we need that scene? Did we need that chapter? Did I need to know how many times Xaden and Violet were going to fly back and forth so that their horny as fuck dragons could bang? It just happened so much. It just happened so much. I mean, moving on, more things I don't understand. Like, why is all the tension between Xaden and Violet based on whether Violet can get Xaden's secrets without asking? Like, she wants him to be very open and honest with her at all times. She doesn't want to have to beg for information. She wants him to kind of come out and say, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, at all times. But at the same time, Violet is being tortured for information as part of her grades this year. And also she won't even tell her own friends, like, her own secrets. And it's like actively destroying her friendships. But yet, this argument with Xaden drags on for like the whole book. And the goalposts move so much. They kind of get to this point of, she asks something and she wants the truth. But then later in the book, you insist on making me ask for things that you should openly share. The goalposts keep moving. The goalposts keep moving. Because Violet, in turn, does not always share things with Xaden. She does things without his knowing. Like, she went off to get, like, this luminary from the dodgy Viscount, even after they had a whole conversation and he said, don't do it, don't go to him, we don't trust him. And she went anyway, and his bitch ass knew that she was gonna go, I think because he has, like, magic mind reading powers, and he beat her to it and he was there when she arrived. But the whole point was, not only did she actively, like, lie to him, she then left knowing that he wouldn't know, and in her mind, her reasoning was that if she could get there without telling him, it would be way too late for him to come and intervene and do anything about it. And it's like, hang on a minute, double standards. It really does drag on for like the whole book though. It's like they really couldn't think of like any other reason for them to have like this sort of like angsty back and forth, because obviously they were meant to have like a sort of enemies to lovers romance in book one, which they're not enemies at any point. Like, he vaguely threatens her, but like, I'm not even sure we can call it a threat, bearing in mind other people are like actively trying to kill each other at all times in this book. So like, you know, and like he gives her some daggers and like teaches her to train sort of thing, and like at no point, like, there's no point where their enemies are, like, they just aren't. They just aren't. It's not enemies to lovers. But that's what the book wants to be, and that's what the book wants you to think it is. So they keep inventing reasons, like, why they have to be apart at this book, like, at the start, so that they can get back together over the course of this book for, like, dramatic tension. Because if they were just, like, ooh, lovey-dovey together from, like, page one, oh, where's the pining? Where's the angst? Where's the, oh, the dramatic arguments and, like, the, do you know what I mean? That's what she wants to put in the book, and they were so together in book one, so now it's kind of like, well, we've got to think of a convenient reason to break them up and then start the process again. And then they're finally back together, and obviously at the end of this book they're like, well, Xaden's venom now. I feel like they were just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. So obviously that's why they're gonna be angsty, apart, oh my god, I can't trust you to love me anymore, oh, but I still really like you, oh, but you're a venom, in the next book. Can't fucking wait for it. And on that note, like, why is Xaden venom? Like, what the fuck? Like, for real. But to my knowledge, like, he's doing this fight, the Venin's doing its expository villain dialogue, big, do you know what I mean? He's like, oh, I'm gonna do a big monologue about how you... I can't even think about it. They were so close to the end of the battle anyway, and I think it's implied that the only reason Xaden survived this fight he was losing, he thought that he was accepting the deal of becoming Venin to, like, save himself, save his friends, save Violet, I guess. I just feel like if he just hadn't done that, they would have just won the fight anyway, because the woods went back up, and he just wouldn't have been Venin. I just think it was so dumb. I just think it was so dumb. We all know that the reason that he's Venin is to give the romance some stupid sad boy, bad boy angst for the next book, you know? Oh, I have also written down, again, the whole thing about dragons knowing everything, and they could tell their riders at any time, but, like, I think the thing the book uses is that the Dragon Council just, like, doesn't agree. It's called the Empyrean, which is the name of this book series, and this Empyrean, this Dragon Council, just does not agree on what the right path forward should be. So they're just sitting in this sort of pointless status quo for like no reason. They've not decided to not ever tell the humans, but they haven't decided if they should tell the humans like about Venin and stuff. So for all intents and purposes, for the foreseeable future, they've just chosen not to do it, which was like, okay, up until the point where Ted and everybody flew back and was like, we're actually just going to tell everyone at Basgiath now. And I guess the dragons were like, alright. So they just did. It's like, could you not have done this like 10 years ago? And yeah, and like I said, it does just mean that dragons are like fighting and dying in like this fake Griffin War. And I know that the war is technically real because obviously the foreign country, Orisha, the rebel country, is trying to invade parts of Navarra to get the resources they need to fight back against the Venin. But the dragons know the reality of what's really going on, and I just feel like it's stupid. Like, why are they going off to fight in this war that they could just be like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. They could just actually be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. The only reason that the book really gives is that just it was a secret. The dragons were keeping things secret. So I guess they just went along with everything to be like, well, it's a secret though. Oh, and on that note, dragons apparently need humans to make runes, but in all other aspects of, like, every aspect of existence, dragons are superior, right? They live longer, they're smarter, they're stronger, they're blah blah blah, right? And yet humans make all of the decisions that aren't, like, explicitly related to dragons. Dragons can decide what dragons do, but everything else, like the progression of, like, what they're doing in the war college and, like, who goes off to die and, like, where dragons are sent to fight, the humans make all those decisions, and the humans are not subservient to the dragons. And it's like, the dragons actually know what's going on. So, like, why are the dragons like this? The book goes into so much detail about how, like, the dragons know everything, and, like, a dragon never makes a mistake. A dragon always chooses the correct rider. You know, dragons do not serve humans. Dragons do not obey humans. Like, they have a partnership with their specific rider, but a dragon does not answer to a human. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, but what happens when one human man is in charge of every other human person, and he makes a decision which affects every other human, and all those humans therefore are doing that decision, which means that their dragons are also doing it. So they are obeying his orders. I just don't get why they're just letting all this happen. And the reason Rebecca Yarros has put out there is just that dragons are keeping secrets, dragons are just being secretive, and it's like, okay, but why? Why do they need to keep the secret? Because now everyone knows the secret, and now things can actually happen. And it's like, what was the point? What was the reason? And again, why is Navarra keeping the ability to make wards a secret? Like, this secret forbidden knowledge, I guess. I suppose it's because after you've translated it like 1 billion times and finally got the right translation, it does reveal that there is a 7th super rare secret breed of, like, dragon that the only one we know of is Andana, but, like, for the past, like, several hundred years, why is this not just, like, common information how to make these wards? I understand that Navarra does not want to share their wards with the neighbouring countries, and they didn't want to let those countries, like, into their wards to be protected, and they weren't going to share resources, specifically. What exactly was the issue with just, like, any of these other countries having the knowledge on how to make their own wards to defend themselves within their own borders? It's not like Navarra is, like, invading for natural resources or something and wants them weakened. They don't leave their own borders. Why do you give a shit what goes on outside the wards? If the other country is only invading you because they don't have their own adequate protection against this real evil magic threat, why not just give them the information? Like, you don't even lose any resources by doing that. It's information. You can both know the same thing. It's like, why not just let them know, hey, by the way, here's how you can make your own wards. And, like, I know it takes dragons, and they don't necessarily have any of those dragons, but at least then they maybe wouldn't be at war, because there would be a really easy explanation of, oh, actually, you don't have the resource of this one super special dragon that, like, Andana can't be used again. And I don't think anybody's known they've existed for hundreds of years. So if they did translate these journals and work out, oh yeah, we need a 7th dragon, they would have just been like, oh, well, we don't have one. I guess I won't continue this long war against my neighbouring country thinking that they're just keeping shit from me. It's just that we don't have the resource. It doesn't exist right now. We've got to wait for it to come into existence again. And if they hadn't fucked up and done all that, Andana could have done the wards in the other country, and then 2 countries would have had wards. They wouldn't have had to let the wards at Basgiath fail and then redo those ones. Because now we're just back to the status quo. What was the point? We're back to square one. I just think it would literally solve the problem of, like, the griffins coming in and attacking places so that they can get resources to smuggle them across the border. Like, they wouldn't need to be smuggling these magic weapons if they just either had their own wards, or if in the hundreds of years since they could have had this information there was never a dragon that could have done that, you know, at least they would have known, hey, it's not necessarily the other country's fault, you know? Because these dragons are super rare, and we just don't have one. It wouldn't necessarily have stopped the fact that they still need those magical dagger resources, but maybe they would have been a bit less hostile, because it's much more of, like, it's less of an active thing you're doing to them, you know? If everyone just knew, hey, the reason why we can't make more wards is because we don't have more dragons. We need this one specific dragon, and we don't got none. We're fresh out of dragon. I just feel like it frees up so many of your resources to go back into fighting the Venom if you're not actively fighting each other so much. And I still don't get why that's like a thing. I still don't get why Navarro was like, yeah, this is definitely the way we want things to be. Let's make up a whole second war, in addition to the one we're already fighting with the real enemy that nobody knows about. Okay, cool. I kind of want to get into a little bit about not so much the plot of the book itself, but just like the quality of the book and the story itself. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad, guys. Personally, I think this book should have been split. So, and it kind of is, and I don't understand why it's just not just like 2 books. So this book is in 2 parts. So part 1 ends with them leaving Basgiath. So Violet's done basically what would be her last year at the War College, even though it wouldn't have been her final year, like she's obviously not going back. She's revealed what's really going on to like her colleagues, like the staff, the students, and they're now all going to leave, and like she's going to take all her newfound allies off to like the rebel base. That is where part 1 ends. And I feel like that should have been the end of a book. It's kind of like a dramatic triumphant moment, sort of like they're all making like long speeches. It's kind of really funny because Dane tries to make a speech and everyone's like, who the fuck is this guy? And then Xaden has to come in and make an even better speech that's so much obviously better than Dane's like very stick up his arse HR level corporate ass kind of email speech. You know, Xaden does a speech, Violet does a speech, they do a mutiny, just a bit of light treason, and then they go off. And then you would think that that is a good place to end what would be book 2, and then the second half of this book, it feels like it should be a whole separate book. It also seems like it's about like the right length. If it were edited better, and if it were like plotted out a bit better, that could be like one whole book. And personally, it feels like maybe these were 2 books, like maybe these were drafted book 2 and book 3, and then at some point in the process somebody's just kind of like slapped them together, because there is just such a disconnect between those 2 books. Like there's no decent transition between, like it just kind of jumps straight into Violet and like her friends and like everybody from Basgiath that's decided to go with them, all now sort of like approaching the rebel base. The plot sort of dies down again. It feels like that really was the climax, and then we've sort of started again from scratch. And the length of like each part of this book is approximately the same length as Fourth Wing, in my opinion. Like this book is about, Fourth Wing was like 400-ish pages. This book is 620 something pages long, but the font is much smaller than it was in Fourth Wing. So I feel like this book is approximately double the length of Fourth Wing, and therefore I feel like this just should have been 2 books, but they feel very disconnected. On the same kind of vein, editing and pacing, awful. The book has just awful pacing. Plot just seems to come at you. Nothing is built up to, nothing is really, like I said, there's not really much in the way of like foreshadowing and stuff like that. Like you can kind of see stuff coming a mile away, but in terms of the actual like what is happening, it is just characters kind of like vaguely doing things in between, and then plot comes at them kind of as and when I think the author thinks, oh, we've not had like a high stakes scene or like an action scene or like a whatever. It feels like a lot of, okay, now we're doing this, or now we're doing that, or now we're doing this instead. There's no like through line, there's no thing where you know, okay, this is where we're going to be going. And I'm not saying things can't like change directions or anything, but I think it is because the majority of the plot for the entire first half of this, at least for Violet, is just I am at school and I am passing my classes, and like there's the rebel stuff going on in the side, but like she doesn't really have much of a goal apart from like pass classes, and that would happen whether she was the main character or not. So it just feels weird and disjointed, and so much of it just felt like padding. So it does mean that the book drags, like it really drags. And like I said about like the word count, the page count, it did not need to be this long. I said it before I went in, like, is it really this deep? And the answer is no. And it kind of supports my whole, this was probably 2 books to begin with theory. As a result of that, with it being so long, it is obviously a much more difficult task to edit a larger book. And I would say a more complex book, because that is what it is trying to be, though it is failing. But a more convoluted story, for sure. So this book released 8 months, I think, after the initial release of Fourth Wing. And I know for some books, like, that isn't that unusual. Though personally, I kind of assume that about a year between books is normal, and I know 8 months isn't that far off. But then, that is usually for shorter books. This is Rebecca Yarros's first attempt at a fantasy series. And it is the first time that she has ever written anything this long. And she is clearly not very good at it. Fantasy world building and fantasy plots are not her strong point, and yet we have this 620 plus page book. And the release window was somehow still only 8 months after Fourth Wing. How many drafts did she get? Like, did any of that happen, or did they just kind of like wing it and just like shove it through minor edits for like spelling and grammar and just shove it off to the printers for like a holiday release? It really does feel like they just kind of got this out as quick as possible, I think, for this holiday season, and mainly in order to capitalize off of like the series hype and like the book talk hype before that all inevitably eventually like dies down and people move on to something else. And that time frame is also including all like the special editions and things for both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. So like any of like the exclusive releases or like the bonus chapters for like this book or Fourth Wing, all that stuff that's been coming out recently because of like the hype around this series. And I'm like, okay, so you were doing all that as well as releasing what I think for her has been the hardest book she's ever had to write, because she doesn't normally write this genre. This is longer than anything she's ever read. She doesn't know how to write a fantasy. She's clearly not getting like good editing and feedback. I feel like this was 2 books in one and it's had quite a short turnaround time. Really? Was this the plan? And I'm not saying that every author needs 8 months or more to successfully put out a decent sequel, but I am saying that this is not a decent sequel, and this book did need more time. I really do think this book would benefit from a whole like extra round of edits, ideally multiple. I think it does have core structural issues, again feeling like it's these 2 disconnected halves that have just sort of been like sandwiched loosely together, with just pages and pages of characters just trudging through various scenarios up until the point where they finally get to any of the one that actually matters. This book was not ready to be published, in my opinion. It needed more time to be refined, I think. This book should have gone through several more stages, I think, of drafting and editing before being slapped together and thrown to the masses, because in its current state it's just bad. Okay, this kind of whole section on like what I feel like they should have done for this is gonna feel like, it's gonna feel weird if you like know me and what I like in books, because like I'm not really like a big romance reader. Like I'm not a spicy fantasy kind of gal. I don't dislike a romance in a book, but like it's not what I want going into it. That's not why I pick up a book. So this might sound like I'm arguing for somebody else's sake, but like I kind of am, to be honest. Because like this book isn't for me, so really I'm arguing this for the fans. So it doesn't really take a genius to know. I think the strong point of Fourth Wing, again, not necessarily something that I personally enjoy, but it does seem to be the thing that I think resonates the most with the fans of the series, and that was the romance. The romance, I think, was the main draw of the book. I didn't see people like on Book Talk being like, oh my god, this has the best world building I've ever seen, or oh my god, the prose is so immaculate and so captivating. No, people were saying like, oh my god, new spicy book boyfriend, come read about Xaden's abs. Do you know what I mean? Like that was the draw for this book. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if that's what the book was, that's what it was. That is why people picked up Fourth Wing. People wanted to read about Violet and Xaden getting spicy with like this dragon plot in the background. The series otherwise is just a very bland, unimaginative YA fantasy, and it has enough explicit sex scenes in it to warrant therefore being sold as an adult book. That's without any of like the early teen level plot and pacing and writing actually being elevated to fit like the same like age demographic. Like, this is not adult writing, it's just YA with sex in it. And I think we all know this. Like, I don't think anybody's denying that that's what the series is. At least that's what Fourth Wing is. But people like the spice, people like the romance. People were buying into this, I'm pretty sure, for like the set scenes and the romantic, like, not quite enemies to lovers plotline. It's the same reason that people like things like Sarah J Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses series. It's the romantasy genre, it's fantasy romance, tends to have explicit spicy sex scenes in it, and that is what the people want. Like, that is what they're here for. People were buying this book for the romance. At this point, therefore, ask yourself 2 things. If you remove the romance and the sex scenes from Fourth Wing, is it still an adult book written for adults? And question 2 is, if you remove the romance and the sex scenes from Fourth Wing, would anyone still enjoy the book without those things included? Like, without the romance and the sex scenes, does the rest of the book have enough merit to be enjoyed on its own? The answer to both is no. It's not necessarily a critique, because like I said, I understand that Fourth Wing is not that. Fourth Wing knew what its target audience was, and Fourth Wing really appealed to its target audience. Fourth Wing was a hit with its target audience. It appeals to people who enjoy the fantasy setting, but they're primarily interested in the romance and the spice. And it's a valid opinion to have. It's not one that I have, so this series was never going to be for me, but like, I can at least look at Fourth Wing and appreciate the way it succeeds with the people it was aimed at. For some reason, Iron Flame is weirdly lacking in spicy scenes. There are a couple sprinkled in there, not nearly as much or as often as in Fourth Wing. The romance is like on the back burner. It's weird. The romance seems like stilted. Violet and Xaden are constantly in like this limbo of not going back and not going forward. It's constantly Violet doing the same umming and ahhing about being like, oh, I can't trust you, I want more information out of you, I want this, I want that, and Xaden kind of being like, well, I'm trying to protect like thousands of people and like this war that's been going on for ages, like I have some responsibilities that aren't just be Violet's boyfriend, and Violet is like, but be Violet's boyfriend first and then everything else second, and like that's kind of like where the romantic drama is. So they keep having the same conversation almost with the exact same words hashed out again and again and again, and it's like they have this conversation like 5, 6, 7 times throughout the whole book. Every single time they meet they have the same conversation, and like so often it's just them being like, oh well, we don't trust each other enough, so I won't say that I love you, or we're not gonna kiss, or we're not gonna have sex, and eventually they do kind of build up back to having that. Like they do get like, there are spicy scenes in this, there are like romantic pining scenes in this, but so scant compared to how much was in Fourth Wing. There are so few of them compared to how much they were in Fourth Wing. Most of their interactions is just Violet kind of trying to decide like what she actually wants and like moving the goalposts a little bit each time, and Xaden never quite being able to meet them, even though he keeps like moving closer, she just moves the goalpost away, and they have this same argument again and again, like while they sort of and ah about whether or not they're finally gonna fuck each other. It's just sort of like weirdly put on hold. It's like in stasis. To be totally honest, the times when there is like explicit smut on the page, like I actually remember some of like the choreography from Fourth Wing, and like I don't think it was anything particularly special, but at least I kind of like, I know what was happening, right? But in this, I just feel like the sex scenes were just kind of like, I don't know, maybe they just weren't as good, they just weren't as spicy. It's not the thing that I pick up the book for, but I feel like they were kind of few and far between, and when you eventually got to them, it did not feel like it had the same amount of payoff as like any of like book 1 sex scenes did. And so instead of focusing on the romance, the book instead focuses on the fantasy plot, of which there is very little, to be honest. But it seems so concerned with trying to develop like these already not very good aspects of like the world that make very little sense, like the inter-country politics that don't really make sense, the history that doesn't really make sense, the dragon law and the dragon society that doesn't really make sense. Bearing in mind, like I've already said, we don't really get to see the world that we're in, we don't really get to care for it, we don't really get to understand it. It's just, you don't need to know, because the book doesn't care if you know or not, because the book doesn't care about anything else that isn't Violet or Xaden. And like you would think that it would just stick to their romance, but it kind of takes the romance away but doesn't add any more to the fantasy aspect. It doesn't do it any better than the first book did, which like, at least the first book's excuse was that, yeah, we're doing a romance more than a fantasy, but this book wants to do fantasy with the romance kind of second, but it still doesn't do the fantasy. So yeah, there's no culture, there's no real sense of like time or place. Everyone talks with like a modern American voice as well, so that I guess it's to be relatable to the primarily American, like older teen, young 20s kind of audience, I guess, and they say fuck a lot in this book, and again I guess that's to remind you like, oh, this is an adult book for adults, it's for grown-ups, you know? But the setting itself is kind of like vaguely fantasy medieval, which just it seems to jar every time they're saying like mom or something like that. It's like it's not really based in any one, like to be honest, I could exposit, I'm like, this could be based on like any sort of culture, like it is vaguely medieval, but is it like a British, like European-y kind of medieval, or like is it that sort of Western medieval, or could I, like, is there anything, any description in this book that's, because somebody out there could be thinking like, if you're from another country, maybe you're just picturing like your own kind of medieval influence, like nothing's really described, there's not really a culture, there's not really a, like they sort of name drop like vague gods, there's like a god of this and a god of that, and it's kind of like, well, you don't really see anybody actually worship them though, they're just kind of name dropped as being in there, and it's kind of like nobody's really actively religious. It's kind of in the same way that you might like burn an effigy on Guy Fawkes Night, or if you're not British, like you might like put a tooth under a child's pillow or something for like the tooth fairy. It's like that level of commitment, but like nobody out there is sitting down and saying prayers to the tooth fairy, you know? Nobody out there is like actively thinking that Santa is like this omniscient deity or something. Like the only time they ever come up is in very specific like little ways, or just to be name dropped, I think, to make the book feel more rich and fantastical, but nobody actually worships the gods. I don't think there's like chapels or altars or religious texts anywhere in this. People just kind of like know them, you know? They're kind of on the same level as telling children about, like, the boogeyman or something. It's like, well, they're just kind of like this cultural name drop. Funeral rites, I guess, and that's kind of about it. Which makes sense because all people do in these books is just die. So, like, I guess that's it, you know? Maybe if we see a wedding, which might be on my future bingo card, it's like, maybe we'll get, like, a god of love or something like that, but otherwise, we're not going to see any actual, like, I feel like she's played Skyrim maybe once or has googled it and is like, oh, they have like 9 divines that all have like various spheres of influence or something like that, and it's like, well, I can do that, and it's like, can you? No real cultural setting in this book. Most of the names I believe are Irish and Celtic in origin. I did see like a clip of an interview, which was horrendous, so I know that the author therefore put in very little effort, because in this interview clip she's basically pronouncing everything wrong. None of the names as she puts them in the book are actually how she says them, and she's basically just like lifted them from another culture, from another language, and repurposed them, and now people are going to hear her pronouncing how she wants her characters' names to be pronounced, which is not how you pronounce those names in real life, which are like real names to actual like groups of people. But she's just like, she's very American about it all. It's kind of like, if you want to have names which are inspired by actual existing like Celtic names, but which don't actually sound anything like how you would actually pronounce that name, you can just spell them differently. Like, I hate to break it to her, she could just spell them the way that she actually wants them to be pronounced in her book, and then just kind of say that, oh, it was inspired by these names, because I feel like that's kind of like a much less harmful middle ground. It's like, don't just take them piecemeal and then sprinkle them into your little world to make it seem sort of like more like fantasy exotic. You can't just like butcher the pronunciation of a real world language and culture just for personal profit while extolling your own lack of effort and awareness. To get back to my original point here, I have no idea why she didn't just keep the focus for this book on the romance. The bad generic fantasy plot is much less egregious when it's only used as like a form of backdrop for the romance plot. When the romance isn't at the forefront anymore, I have to ask, what are fans reading it for? Like, if you're actually a fan of this series, was this what you wanted? Was this what you wanted? Did you like having to read about like all the crap in between the actual little bits of romance you actually got? Or would you have preferred to have less of that and like more of the actual romance? I feel like the people who came for the romance are more interested in that and not as interested in like this half-assed, poorly thought out, highly derivative like fantasy lore. Would they not have preferred a more character-driven story about characters that they apparently seemingly enjoy? Actual romance and spice and romantic plot that like the first book had a decent amount of. I feel like Rebecca Yarros, as a romance author, like she's primarily a romance author, while it is not to my personal taste, I understand that people who read that genre have said that she does romance well. Like, clearly people liked Fourth Wing for the romance, so at least according to fans of the genre. So it kind of seems baffling to me for her to pivot and try and do like proper fantasy the same way that Sarah J Maas did after like 2 books and a set of prequel novellas in like the Throne of Glass universe. It just seems like she's trying to kind of follow that same formula, but in doing that she's letting the one thing that she's actually known for and actually potentially good at fall by the wayside in order to achieve that, and the results are not good. Just stick to romance. Just do a romance with like vague fantasy. Just do romance. It isn't good. I don't know who wants this. Was this what the fans were asking for? Because I know people were asking for like dramatics probably and like romance stuff, but was this what people wanted? Just do the romance. Just do the romance. Other things I should probably mention, I think this was more prevalent in the first book, is that Rhiannon is, like, she's openly bisexual on the page, and yet of all the characters she was the one who slept with like basically everyone. And I know there were a lot of complaints at the time about things like, well, it's not very good like bi representation. It kind of feeds into a potentially harmful stereotype, and it's not really for me to speak on, but it is probably worth saying that like I do not think that this book has particularly good representation for anyone. I know that this book's main focus representation wise is the sort of chronic illness and like physical disability, especially of the main character. We do also now have Andana the dragon, who has a physical disability, but the main focus for like both books has been Violet's chronic illness, which I think is based on Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I believe the author does have, or something similar. It is not for me, as someone who does not have that chronic illness, to say how you should do representation in like your book, like your own book that's for you and people like you, like your fantasy book that is your like escapist world, that is fine. But I do know that other people who are much more suited to speak on this than I am. Initially with the first book, I kind of thought that the representation was quite decent. Like my friend who does have a chronic illness, she liked the representation that she got in book 1, but I feel like so much of it in the second book, and people did bring this up mainly for book 1, but I feel like it's much more prevalent in the second book. You kind of do always forget that Violet has this chronic illness. It really doesn't come up anymore. It doesn't seem to bother her anymore. Like, you will get the occasional mention of it, but it doesn't have any impact. Like, it affects her no differently than if she did not have this chronic illness. And a lot of what people were saying was so much of Violet's method of dealing with this. While she, like in the first book, she does eventually accept help where she needs it from the people around her, and does this as like a trade. So they give her help with like her physical classes and she gives them help with like their more mental classes, which like is a fine trade, and I feel like that was handled quite well. Where it kind of falls down is the fact that most of the time Violet's method for doing things is to allow herself to get injured and like just push through it, just deal with it, and to cause herself exceptional levels of injury. Fair enough, in this world you do have like fantasy healers that can just sort of magic you better in a much quicker space of time, but it's kind of like for a girl that in the first book couldn't really walk upstairs, or like would even just on her regular day, like being a scribe, she would dislocate her limbs. Sometimes she'd like roll her ankle, like physical injury, something where she'd need to go in to get healed, and that was during her life as a scribe and just as a normal kid running about doing like kid things. Now that she's a dragon rider, she's doing things like aerial combat and like jumping off dragons and like doing like obstacle courses and things and getting stabbed and like all sorts of like highly physical, dangerous activities that like are very strenuous for people who are physically healthy and like much more physically capable than she herself is, and even states that she is. And yet so much of her mentality is just saying she's just going to deal with it, she's just going to go along with it. Like, she's going to break her arm, she's going to dislocate her shoulder, or, you know, and it's not really going to come up, and it's going to be a thing where she's no longer having to find a workaround for these things. She isn't thinking, how can I do this differently? Her whole thing is kind of her saying, I'm going to brute force my way through it, I'm going to get the injury, and I'm just going to heal from the injury. And a lot of people who do suffer from chronic illnesses have said that, like, this is quite a harmful mentality. It kind of both puts down people who aren't willing to do that as maybe lesser for not making the decision to essentially destroy their body for doing the same things that wouldn't otherwise be capable of doing, and that it is essentially a form of self-harm. She's getting something out of it, and it wouldn't be considered that way for a person who doesn't have the chronic illness, but the point is she does have it, she does know it, and it is her responsibility to manage her own health and well-being. And the way that she does it in the book, I have heard many people say that it is considered to be quite harmful stereotyping, like quite a harmful representation of a character with a chronic illness, to just say, well, I'm just going to deal with the pain, I'm just going to push through the pain, I'm just going to act like it isn't there, because that isn't actually helpful to anyone. And I feel like if you're going to advocate for a disability, saying that you just need to deal with everything and endure the pain and just carry on like everyone else, like you don't have that illness, those people are right into saying that that is not a good way of looking at it, and it probably should not be done that way. And like I say, I know this is like an escapist fantasy dragon riding world, and it's not for me to say that you can't have those things. You could have a character like that, you absolutely can make Violet that kind of character, but you would have to note, like within the text, criticize her for it, point out that maybe this is not the best way to do things, praise her for doing those things, don't portray her as this like brave hero that she's in the right for doing those things. Like, don't reward Violet's self-destructive nature with good outcomes when that translates into something that's quite harmful for a real world audience. So I don't think I can really speak on the topic any deeper than that, but I have seen that conversation going around, and I do agree with that side of it. The other point, which, and I so knew this going in, like it's so easy to tell, but when you Google it, you just get such a satisfaction of being like, I knew this. It's the very pro-military aspect of this book, like this whole series. So this is, as you can probably tell, it's glaringly obvious, this series is written by a military wife, so who, in all the stuff surrounding her text, like the author's notes and dedications and things, they give big military wife vibes. There's no way you went into this not knowing she was a military wife when she says, "To my own Captain America, through the deployments, the moves, sunny highs, darkest lows, it's always been you and me." I mean, it's kind of wild that, like, when she writes this book, part of the plot is, like, military propaganda, and I'm like, okay, but a little bit of a side-eye there. I do get the feeling that being married to a guy in the military is the majority of her personality. And it's not to say that I've seen a particular prevalence for this specific kind of spicy literature is very popular among military wives, and I have seen like a lot of military wives that go on to write spicy erotica, spicy fanfiction. It kind of seems to come with the territory. I can't imagine why. So, as you might guess, a lot of this series is very pro-military. So it's like you've got the recruits, you've got like the deadly training school, they're all very romanticized. So even with people dying half the time, like the aim is to make you want to be in the world of Fourth Wing, you know? There are a lot of books that I read and love, and I don't necessarily want to be in the world, but I think the idea is that I see people wearing like Basgiath, I'm so sorry for calling out my friend Sarah, but like I see people wearing like Basgiath War College t-shirts and things like you are graduated students, you know, like college sweaters and stuff, but varsity jackets and things that say like Basgiath War College or like class of whatever, that sort of thing. I guess the enjoyable fit, it's kind of like picking like a Hogwarts house, you know, except it's pick the quadrant you want to die in. For the fandom, I guess there's the idea of what would your signet be, which is like your special form of magic, and like what kind of dragon would you have, and like, and you can get like the t-shirts that say like, you know, Dragon Riders quadrant and that sort of thing. So like the aim is for the fans to want to be in this universe, so like it is heavily romanticized. And I did sort of pass on this with the first book, because while it was pretty glaringly obvious in the first book to pretty much everyone but the characters involved, there was a lot of propaganda and like misdirection happening within the military school, so you can kind of give some of the characters a pass for just not picking up on it, even though they're meant to be smart, and it would have made like some nice plot in there. They just decided not to do that, but okay. With this book, with this second book, there just is not an excuse for it. Violet, our main character, supposedly our voice of reason, when faced with basically like all these Griffin Riders who come from their own like Griffin Rider school, they basically tell her how not okay it is for Basgiath War College to have been run like it is, with like the students dying every day. They don't have that same sort of like mentality over there. And Violet, the main character, goes on to say how like, no, they're wrong actually. Because she's come to realise that the extreme abuse she suffered at the school made her stronger and like helped her get to like where she is today. And so it's okay actually. All the tests where her friends died in like really unfair or like coincidental ways, all of that was all just filtering out the weak. So now they're left with like the strong, useful people, and it was necessary for the good people to die, to give everyone left both something to like fight for, like to remember, and also to get used to the grief of losing people so they can get over it faster, and therefore be stronger and better actually. So there's that. There's a part here towards the end of chapter 19 where Violet and Rhiannon are talking about the first years taking the gauntlet, which is basically like the deadly obstacle course they do at Basgiath. Rhiannon's saying that this and the death it causes is pointless, and Violet argues it's not. And then goes on to say, it's awful that Aurelie fell, that she died, but I think I'm a better rider for having been there, having watched her fall to her death, and know that if I didn't get my ass moving, I was going to be next. Rhiannon rightfully says that that is horrible. And Violet's argument is that so is everything waiting out there for us. It isn't just about physically climbing it, it's about overcoming the fear that we can't. It's about climbing after we see it kill our friends. Parapet, gauntlet, presentation, they seem excessive when we're here, but they prepare us for something way worse when we leave. And basically tells Rhiannon that she does not know what it's like out there, and that therefore Violet really isn't going to consider her point of view. Violet goes on to say, and as horrible as it might be, as callous as it might make me, watching Aurelie fall, and Prior burn, and even Jack Barlow get crushed under my landslide, prepared me for the moment I had to leave Liam's body on the ground and fight. If I'd sat there and mourned like I wanted to, none of us would be here. Imogen, Bodhi, Xaden, Garrick, everyone, we'd all be dead. There's a reason they want us to watch our friends die. We are the weapons, and this place is the stone they used to sharpen us. Basically, as I've just said, that like, all of that hardship made her stronger, made her and the people that are still alive, that have still survived, more like worthwhile as allies, stronger people, better people, and like they're here now for a reason, and that everyone else kind of died to get them there, I guess is kind of the implication, which like is a weird thing for it to come out of the brain of your main character. It's kind of like, well, I kind of got to disagree with that, and it's a weird pivot for Violet to make, considering she's been so upset about people like Liam, about like when she was really upset about the girl on the obstacle course in the first book. It's kind of like, well, I mean, by that logic you could just like kill everyone and be the last person standing, and oh, you'd be so strong and stoic for it though. Like, it's such a weird pivot, right? And the book makes it really clear that the Dragon Riders are tougher and better and like more competent and more bonded unit than like any of the Griffin Flyers. Like the Griffin Flyers tend to be quite, like, they get in line well, they're very efficient, and like they have their own separate skills. Like the only thing the Flyers are better at is stuff like making runes, which you can use to sort of supplement your powers or like do other things basically. But even though the Riders aren't as good at doing stuff like runes, it's kind of implied that they're still like better than the Flyers like anyway without needing the runes. Like they have dragons and the dragons breathe fire, and the only thing the Flyers have going for them combat wise is that they are used to fighting venom, but they're less powerful. So it's like, well, I guess it is just kind of weird how Violet supposedly cares so much for like the fate of her friends and also the fate of like all these people outside of Navarra's wards, and like the injustice of them dying for like no reason, while basically just trying to survive without like the same protections and privileges that she has as someone born inside the wards of Navarra, and also to kind of like a high standing family. But her fellow recruits from like first year and everything, who were just trying to survive and like become riders, like I guess for the privilege or to defend their own home or to do what they thought was right, because nobody knows what the actual truth is at this point. Basically just the same as Violet in the first book. No, their deaths are actually like really useful and they were supposed to happen. So even though Violet's been like super hung up on like the death of this guy Liam, he was Xaden's like cousin, but they were like really good friends or whatever in the first book. He got killed at like this big venom battle at the end of the first book, and like she's been like really hung up on that. And like I'm sure she even kind of basically acknowledges his death as being like really good for her actually. See, when your friends die, it makes like your backstory and your resolve stronger. And it isn't an injustice, and it is necessary for personal gain. If you're not like massively pro-military, it is kind of like a weird read, if I'm honest. I think to end, I'm just kind of going to quickly go through some other little like points that I may have made on my phone that didn't really fit anywhere here, that I maybe just want to get off my chest and rant about. So I'm just going to have a flick through and see if anything is worth talking about. Oh, one of them I'm going to go ahead and say is characters and their development not necessarily being quite linear, or just like forgetting how characters are characterized. And I'm talking about Violet. Basically, like the most traumatic thing Violet's ever gone through is seeing Liam, her friend, die at the end of book 1 when he was like attacked by the venom, and like seeing some of their other friends, like when the venom, they can basically do like this magic spell that like drains all the, they like drain the life force from the ground, and anyone stood in the area just like withers and dies immediately, and there's like no way to stop it. And she saw this happen again to some of like her friends, like her fellow recruits, right? So this is like the most traumatic experience she's ever gone through. And then like in Iron Flame, bearing in mind like she thinks about Liam all the time, like she literally like sees Liam as like an apparition sometimes when she gets really stressed during like torturing, like she literally visually sees him there. But then there's a scene where they come up against like a riderless orange dragon as like one of their class trial things, and so Violet thinks to herself, I haven't known this type of terror since Tern began channeling, and definitely not since I manifested my signet. Now that was in book 1, right? She manifested her lightning signet in book 1. She was like having like raunchy sex with Xaden and setting off her lightning powers the whole time, right? So like she's had lightning powers well before the end, well before she watched her friends die. And in my head I'm thinking, really? You haven't been this scared since you got super like powerful, super lightning powers? Maybe not since the venom attack and they killed all your friends and they stabbed you and you watched people die and you were like, oh my god, monsters and evil magic is real? That wasn't the most terrified you've ever been. The most terrified you've ever been was before that, when you got lightning magic. Is that factually correct for Violet now? Okay, sure. It's what the book says. Oh, I do like that. I kind of wish this was a movie or a TV show, only for the point that I know exactly how people would edit it to take the piss. Obviously Violet and Xaden talk psychically, just in each other's heads, they can hear each other. And so there are so many scenes where they have dialogue on the page back and forth, but other characters are clearly just stood around. And it reminds me of, do you know when you used to get all like those meme videos that were just edited to like, it would like remove all the other noise and silence, like if somebody's got like an inner monologue, like in Scrubs or something, it's like, oh, here's what it sounds like without the inner monologue, and it's just extended awkward silences and like occasionally like a shoe squeaking. I'm pretty sure there's like a version of the Death Note characters where it's their conversation but without Light's inner monologue. That's what this is giving. That's what this book is giving. If you actually look at it, it's like, what are all the other characters doing during like these extended silences? There is one point where it kind of points it out, but I still don't think it makes up for all the other times when Xaden and Violet are just having a mental conversation and everyone else is just silent, just stood around, and it's like, what's going on, because they don't know, like, before that, I don't think, that they can, like, just chat on, like, a mental walkie-talkie. It's weird. Not necessarily a complaint, but it is a complaint for me personally. When they bring Jack back to life, this guy is, like, deathly allergic to oranges specifically, and I'm like, why don't you all start, like, eating oranges and drinking oranges and, like, wearing orange oil and, like, I would just be carrying pocketfuls of oranges. Like, I would just start lobbing oranges at him. I just feel like he has an orange dragon as well. No wonder he killed his own dragon. The boy was traumatized. Oh, again, characters not remembering things about each other is really annoying. Like, so many times in book one, because Violet has, like, this, like, super long, like, silver ombre hair, like, it's brown at the top and then it fades into, like, a silvery white at the bottom, and every time she wears her hair up in, like, a coronet most of the time, in a braid, but whenever she takes her hair down in the first book, Xaden gets, like, unreasonably horny, and on multiple occasions he tells her explicitly to her face, like, if she ever wants to have perfect control over him, get him to do anything at all, get him to beg, he's like, just take down your hair, just wear your hair down, and I will do literally anything for you. And, like, in book 2, there's a scene where Violet has her hair down. Kat, the girl who's, like, Xaden's ex, who she has, like, this stupid girl hate thing with, is being like, oh, you didn't do anything with your hair, you just left it down, and, like, implying that it's boring. And Violet's, like, freaking out. She's like, oh my god, Kat's so much hotter than me, Xaden's not gonna think I'm attractive because I just wore my hair down, like, so boring. And I'm like, girl, just get it together. He told you multiple times in the first book. And, like, again, this is Violet being like, oh, I want to know everything about you. He told you this multiple times and you don't even remember this one thing about your guy, about your actual man. You don't remember how he likes your hair. He's told you so many times, Violet. It's like, get a grip, get a grip. I know I've mentioned this once before, but the fact that the other country were just keeping one of the venin in a box, just in a box, and it's like, I don't know how you can make these guys, like, scary and threatening, and also tell me that one of them was just stuck in a box. You can't have both. That was another question as well, because I know that Jack got brought back to life, so, like, he must not have essentially died when he got a mountain dropped on him, sure, whatever. That must mean that he's still bonded to his dragon, the dragon that he kills, right? But normally, when a person bonds with a dragon, if the dragon dies, the rider then always dies. And Jack's dragon died, and I'm like, does his venin magic keep him from dying? Does that mean that he can just live? Was he never actually bonded to the dragon? Like, there's no real explanation for it. Like, he kills his own dragon, and it's like, well, he should be dead. He should be dying. I know that you can turn around and say, well, he's venin, it must not work like that, but it's like, yeah, but you think the book would set up that it doesn't work like that? Because we're all sat here kind of being like, is he gonna die yet? And it's like, I guess not. I guess it just doesn't work that way. But the book never sets up that it works that way. And even after the fact, it doesn't really explain why Jack doesn't die when he kills his own dragon if he was bonded to his dragon. Does being venin negate the fact that if your dragon dies, you won't die? Does that mean that if Xaden's dragon dies, he won't die because he's now a venin? How does it work? Is one of the facts of the lore ever going to be maintained, or are they all just interchangeable? Sorry, this is just, after having just said that and scrolling through, like, these are like my live reactions, like, to the book. Immediately after Jack turns venin, this is my favourite picture I think I've taken from the whole book, and it just says, somehow. And I'm like, yeah, that is kind of like the vibe for the whole book. Stuff happens and the characters are like, somehow? This is what's happening now, and it's like, I guess. This should just be like, the whole theme of the book is just, somehow. Are we gonna explain it? Somehow. I still don't get why he killed his own dragon. Even if he was evil and controlling it, surely it would be better to have a dragon that you control than to not have one at all. I'm just so confused. I'm so confused. Like, did they just want a venin around for funsies? Just what was the reason for any of this? And I do just have to reiterate, once again, the line, welcome to our fucked up family, guess we're brothers now, etched in my brain. Oh, I'm gonna be quoting it so much. I can't, it's so bad, it hurts to have this memory. It hurts to know those words in that order. They shouldn't be there in that order, but they are. And I had to endure them. It really is the worst ending to any book, I think, ever. I've read books whose plot-wise the endings have disappointed me more, usually because the rest of the book is better than this. But, like, I don't think I've ever read a worse final line of a book, ever. Including fanfiction, any times you had to read other children's, like, English homework in, like, primary school even. I don't think I've ever seen anything that bad. And I've read like so many copypastas in my time, I actually can't comprehend how bad it is. I think I've kind of gotten to the end of everything I wanted to say. I mean, I probably haven't, let's be honest. There's probably more that I could say. There's probably more that I could rant about. But I've been ranting for so long, I genuinely have such a sore throat right now. I'm just so confused why this book exists in the way that it does. Because I know when Fourth Wing came out, people were just complaining. They were like, oh, it's another like low effort kind of like romance, like some spice, and then there's just like this fantasy shit thrown on top of it. But people liked it, people liked the romance. And you kind of think, well, if they're going to do a book 2, they would at least do it for the people that liked the bit of book 1. And they just... I feel like this book is trying to please the people who said they didn't like book 1, who were maybe more invested in the fantasy aspect, but this pleases no one. This is the worst of both worlds. I mean, right now my brain is kind of mush. I'm not really sure what else I could say. I'm sure there probably is more that I could say, but at this point, I mean, how long even is this video? Is it like an hour long? I'm not cut out for rants like this, guys. I mean, I can rant this long, but the fact that I've got to like structure it and edit it... So far, that's how I feel about the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. I know that people do like them. I do not understand it, but I must accept it. So like, I think this has like 3 more books to go in the series. I mean, how bad can it get, really? And I'm not saying that in a hopeful way where I'm like, well, it can't get any worse. No, I'm actually asking, how bad do we think it can get? How low can it go? Do you know one thing I can do before I sign off? I'm going to share this with you now. I kind of got this idea from, I've watched a lot of Jenny Nicholson's videos throughout the pandemic. She used to do like Star Wars bingo, and some of them were genuine predictions for like future Star Wars projects, and some of them were just like crackpot fan theories or things that would be like the funniest. And so I did do my own Fourth Wing book 3 onwards little bingo card. And I feel like it would be fun to maybe run through what I've got on my bingo card. Now, I need you to know that I made this in like 5 minutes as a joke, but I'm going to keep it. And I'm going to put this out there, and I'm going to say, these are the things that I have on my Empyrean book 3 bingo card. Let's go through them, shall we? Number 1, obviously, surprise love triangle. With Xaden now being Venin, it kind of opens up the door for like what I'm going to say is like a fake will they won't they sort of thing, because you need to add that tension back in. Obviously, you can't have them like fully together from page 1. Obviously, with book 2, we got like the faux girl hate sort of thing, you know, the threat of, oh, Xaden had another woman a long time ago, and it's like, well, yeah, we knew that, but okay. Make it a plot point, I guess. I don't know, it could be Dane again. God, I hope it's not. God, I so hope it's not. Please kill Dane. But like, maybe there's going to be someone else, you know, while Xaden is absent. Potentially Violet's going to have to confide in someone else who could be a potential romantic love interest. So like, if you're saying that's a dumb idea, yeah, but so is all of this. And so is all of this. Number 2, kind of in the same vein, I've just put the quote, I don't trust myself around you. I feel like Xaden's going to say something much to this effect, or is going to act in that way. He's going to do some sort of like, yeah, I'm Venin now, I can't be near you, I've got to go away, I've got to go like do some Venin soul searching somewhere else. I can't come back to be the rebel leader because I'm Venin now, I'm the enemy. It's like, oh Violet, I love you, but like I can't be near you because who knows what I'll do, I'm all dark and mysterious now. It's gonna happen. Number 3 on my bingo card, 10 fights Coda. Self-explanatory. We haven't really had a big dragon fight, and I don't know if this is going to be in book 3, but like I feel like it's time, right? I feel like it's time. Bingo square number 4 is basically a marriage proposal without getting married. So what I mean by this is some sort of like promise, some sort of like thing about like we are forever bonded, forever mated, and I don't just mean like in the dragon way. I mean some sort of ritual, some sort of exchange of something. It could be vows, it could be rings, it could be like getting a matching tattoo, it could be literally anything, but something that can be interpreted as or read as basically like a marriage proposal or marriage ceremony without them actually being an actual husband and wife. I feel like that's very military wife to put in there, and I'm calling it something like that is going to happen. Number 5, wild card, pregnancy scare. Gotta throw it in there. Number 6 is more pointless girl hate. I feel like Kat's getting a bit mellow, and I feel like the book is going to go, yeah, you know what we need more of? We didn't do enough pointless girl hate in book 2. Let's put more of it in book 3. There's gonna be some sort of like Venin girl being like, I'm so into Xaden, and Violet's gonna be like, what? I hate you. That's not even that far of how it happened in this book. So like, Next one we have is Violet depression spiral in Xaden's absence. I have never seen Twilight, but I've seen the Spinny gif, and I'm getting Spinny gif vibes, you know? I feel like she's gonna go through a whole thing where Xaden isn't allowed to be around because he's Venin, and so like he can't be with the rebels because they're like, oh yeah, actually you're evil, or like if he is there it might be like, oh, we have to lock you up, or we're going to give you this serum and you can't be connected to Scale, and therefore you're not mentally connected to Violet, and Violet feels this mental absence, and she's gonna be like, I'm real sad about this, guys. And I am gonna talk about it at length on the page in my inner monologue. And we are gonna have to read it. Oh, this is the only square that I really want to happen. My next guess, Brennan Nowlin canon. On like page 4 of Fourth Wing, you learn about how Brennan, Violet's brother, who at that point you think is deceased, but did we really? Tern's old rider, like, died saving Brennan, and his name was Nowlin. And I am so convinced, I was so convinced at the start of Fourth Wing, my brain just went, they were definitely in love. I started reading about it and Brennan just starts talking about Nowlin and like how he died, and I was like, I actually genuinely forgot that they were not canon. I forgot that I made that up in my head. My brain was like, there's no other explanation for this. These guys were in love. This was, because everything in it, it's a romance book, right? It's a romance. Everything is for love. Everything is about the power of love and dying for love. And I'm like, yeah. So I have this on my bingo card, and it's the only one that I need this to happen. I need someone to tell me that like they were actually boyfriends at one point. Like I need to know. You can't tell me it's not canon. I am convinced. The next one, pretty simple. Venin Maven. We've learned that Mavens are like the #1 strongest kind of Venin, and I surely should have put like a caveat on this as well, which I didn't, but you know, well, I'm gonna call it now, is that we don't know what happened to Xaden's mother. Like she's mysteriously absent, and I'm like, well, is she a Venin Maven? Is she gonna be like, welcome home, son? Who knows? You know, maybe he's following in his mom's footsteps. Maybe that's the real trauma. Square number 10 is Violet's second signet is extra special. And I think we knew this would happen anyway, but like, she's not gonna be like, oh, my extra signet is, I can do, you know, something boring that one of the other ones can do. You know, like, oh, it's just ice magic. It's real it's real basic, guys. It's gonna be something like distance wielding, or it would be something like prophetic dreams. So Melgren obviously has these prophetic visions about these battles. There are certain points where it's kind of like, is Violet gonna have these prophetic dreams? She's been having like weird Venin dreams throughout the book. Foresight or prophetic dreams as her like super special, super rare, extra rare ability. You know what I mean? Number 11. Undana invisibility powers. She can already make her scales like super chameleon. That's like her, she's not a colour, she's just like a chameleon dragon. And it's like, well, maybe she can go full invisible. I'm calling it now, she can just go fully invisible, cloaking up, we're gone. Number 12 I've just put is unnecessary royal palace visit. I just think that, like, I'm not counting like the Viscount thing. I feel like at some point they're gonna go to Navarra's actual like royal palace with actual royalty, and like that's just gonna be a whole thing. There's just gonna be a whole scene in like a royal palace, and it gives them an excuse to be like in ball gowns. Maybe there'll be some dancing. People like that setting for romances. I feel like they're gonna do it in book 3. The dragon is a free space, so it could be anything. I've next put Cat is Lysandra 2.0, and what I mean by that is Lysandra was a character in the Throne of Glass books who started out like really catty and girl hatey. Like I feel like the characters hated each other because they were just both girls, and it kind of culminated in they end up like becoming friends and allies, and like you really like Lysandra by the end of the series. And I'm like, I feel like maybe Cat is going to go that way as well, because this has almost been like a paint by numbers attempt at like a Sarah J Maas book, right? The next square, I'm sorry about this one, it's psychic dream fucking. I just think it could happen. Then we've got dad death reveal. Violet's dad's death, super sus. It's like, you're gonna tell me that when he was like looking into like the death of his son and all this stuff to do with like the history and the myth of like the Venin and the Wyvern, it's like, oh, and he just died? He just magically died? He just suspiciously died? I've also got, I don't know if this is what is like wish fulfillment, but I've got Dane GBH, or a cool new scar. So Dane is gonna get horrifically injured and is either gonna have like some sort of like, he's the Kale character, and I don't think I put that together in my head, but I feel like, you know, he's gonna suffer some like horrible injury, he's gonna be like out for it for a bit, but he'll survive. He might get like a cool new scar or something, you know, it just sort of like affirms his friendship and place in the gang or whatever. I hate Dane, but like, you know, I wouldn't mind reading about him getting smushed or something. Next square, Jack dies again, really hoping for it. Then we have Rhiannon's family dies, and it was probably preventable. So her family are kind of like, they're just like people in like a little village. If you want to do pointless character angst, it might be like, oh no, because like her sister or something has like a little baby or something, so she's got like a nephew, something like that, and it's kind of like, oh no, they all died, oh the wyvern came through that way, oh I'm so sad about it, you know. Next square we have outdoor fucking, because I don't think we've done that yet, and I've put bonus in the rain. I reckon there's going to be some downpour boning action going. Seems like the kind of thing this book would do. You can't tell me I'm wrong. I've then got Violet's symbolic haircut. Now, we all know that a character cutting their hair is kind of like symbolic of like change, of like letting go, and I'm like, her hair is the thing that Xaden likes the most, right? And it's like this silver ombre, you know? And I'm like, it's always really long, and I'm like, either in a moment of necessity, like if she's in a fight and it's caught or something, and she has to let it go, or in a moment of her being like, fuck this, I'm getting on with it, I'm no longer being sad about my evil venom boyfriend, haircut, she's got a bob. Oh, a bit of a troll one. Andana gets a hot dragon boyfriend. I mean, why not? The other dragons are horny. Then we have Rebel Council traitor, because I feel like if you're all at the Rebel place, like, we don't really like the leaders very much. They don't always agree with Violet and Xaden, and we're supposed to always like and agree with Violet and Xaden, so one of them's going to be a traitor and is going to betray the rebels, and it's all going to be like, oh no, we never saw this coming, but I saw it. I've said it. Then I've got Mira dating a flyer. When they went to the Viscount's house, there was another flyer there, and her and Mira were like, they had like some good dialogue, and I was like, I hope they at least get to be friends. But if she has to date anyone, I'm like, look, you've at least had some sort of like good personality, like with this person, some good back and forth. Let it be a thing. And then the last one, which I think I kind of already mentioned, but I forgot I put it on here, is Violet gets a tattoo or a scar for Xaden. Either something in battle where they both get scarred, or something where, like, you know, where characters both have to like cut the palm of their hand to like do some magic or something, and it's kind of like, oh, we both have the same matching scar. Or she will do the ritual sort of scarification the same way that Xaden did for his, like, all the children of the rebels. She will do something for Xaden, maybe like a tattoo or something. I think I said that before though. And that's my bingo card. Okay, this video has been so long, I'm so tired. Like, I'm sat on a box and I'm so uncomfortable, my throat hurts, it's sore, I'm cold, I'm hungry. I still don't feel as bad as I felt reading this book. This is still a preferable experience to reading this book. I hated this book. So that was my Iron Flame rant. I don't normally make videos like this, but when I do, apparently I really make them, so... hopefully you guys at least got some amusement out of this. Hopefully this has saved some of you from having to read this book. Because, like, did you really wanna? I don't think so. At least, hopefully not now. And if you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna read it to see how bad it is, it's so much slog. There's so much just, like, shit in between that didn't get trimmed out. It's not worth it. I promise it's not worth it. Either way, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, what emoji can you leave? Just leave me some salt. It's gotta be that, right? Just leave me a salt shaker. And just, honestly, like, how are you feeling about this book? Like, have you read this book? Did you like this book? Like, does anyone feel differently? Is there anything I missed? I hate when I miss things, so if I've not mentioned something, either that somebody else has mentioned that I just didn't pick up on, anything like that, or something that I just forgot, sound off in the comments. I feel like I lost brain cells reading this, so that's my excuse. So with that said, I'm gonna end this here because, like, it's... would I drag this on any longer? Not for like 630 pages, but still. So once again, thank you for making it this far with me. If you did. You deserve some sort of, like, Dragon Rider patch for endurance, let's be honest. If this didn't completely put you off my channel of me ranting ad nauseum, then maybe I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.